Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about stress. This past week, I've gotten lots of emails and lots of comments, lots of correspondence from people who were really triggered by what happened in Oklahoma to a young person by the name of Nex Benedict. So if you don't know this story, Nex Benedict identified as non-binary. They got into a fight in a bathroom in their school, and despite the fact that they were checked out at the hospital, they died the next day. They had seizures and died the next day. Cause of death still hasn't been determined as of my understanding right now, today, as I record this. But next being non-binary, and then just the plethora of stuff that came out of Oklahoma and has been coming out of Oklahoma with school boards making certain changes and the state making certain changes to make it just so much more difficult to be a member of the LGBTQ community, and with some of the homophobia and the vile rhetoric that's been shared. And then, of course, you had that state senator who called people like Nex filth, and that Oklahoma doesn't want this kind of filth in our state. Lots of people have been triggered, and this isn't the first time, right? You know, it happened. I will say that I think it happened to me. It happened to me when Russia invaded Ukraine. I was wildly triggered in that moment. In that first probably 3 months, I was just glued to whatever would give me information about how Ukraine was holding on and what Ukraine was doing and how we were supporting Ukraine. I was so into that. I mean, my production at work, my video, everything suffered. My life suffered because I was so fixated on that. I couldn't turn away from it. I needed to see it. I needed to watch it. I needed to be aware of it. I've come to the conclusion that growing up in the 70s and the 80s, being a child who, I grew up in a town that had an air base, that had an Air Force base. I grew up with air raid sirens going off all the time as they tested them. And we did air raid drills, and I remember being in school and doing nuclear drills. So if there was a nuclear bomb, this is what you're going to have to do. And getting under your desk or up against the wall, whatever, the kids today would be lockdown drills, right? But we would have to do these drills. I grew up with the threat of the commies and the Red Menace. But the Soviet Union was this thing that again, growing up in my context, we all feared. And we were taught to fear them, and it was fed to us, and it was given to us in our water, and it was in our movies, it was in our media, it was in our the political rhetoric that you saw coming from elected officials. It was just everywhere. And when Russia invaded, that's exactly what we'd been taught to be afraid of forever and ever and ever. I wasn't aware as a child when Russia invaded Afghanistan. I really didn't know. That didn't really factor into me at all. I think I was like 6 or 7 when they invaded Afghanistan. But when they invaded Ukraine, a sovereign nation, even different than it was when they went into Chechnya and Georgia. It was different when they went into Ukraine, this sovereign nation that were having their own free and fair elections and doing their thing as much as free and fair elections are. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I was really triggered by that. And again, coming back to, we all have these moments, right? We all have these moments when we feel like, danger is imminent. Okay? As maybe a member of the LGBTQ community, as somebody who's non-binary, hearing Nex's story, understands what Nex has gone through, has experienced some of the same things that Nex experienced, and so therefore they feel endangered, heart racing, mind racing, the stress levels, anxiety is way down deep in their stomach. Stress levels are way over the top. They feel like danger is imminent. There's a school of psychotherapy that I know a little bit about called reality therapy. And this, what I'm about to tell you, isn't reality therapy, but this is what came to mind. Well, it could be. It's a little bit about anyway. The bottom line is, when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling like danger is imminent, ask yourself if it truly is. Right? If it really is imminent, yes, let your stress levels do their thing, because your stress response is perfect in that moment. Your stress response is meant to keep you alive. It's meant to keep you safe. It's meant to keep you healthy. Just let it go, and it will do what it needs to do. You will run, you will fight, or you will, fight, flight, and I can't think of the other one. Right? You'll collapse. Or, in a moment when it's not imminent, is when you can't let your stress levels take over, right? So if it's a moment where danger isn't imminent, you can't let your stress levels stay up there, because the chemicals that your body's releasing as part of its stress response is actually going to be harmful to you. And it's going to be harmful to your relationships, and it's going to be harmful to the people around you. It's going to ruin you for a little while, because there's no thinking when you're in the middle of a stress response like that. There's no thinking at all. It's either, it's all saved me. All of it is, the only thing your brain's thinking is, how can I save this person? How do I keep this person safe? Freeze. Thank you. Freeze. Right? Fight, flight, or freeze. There's no other thought. There's no strategy. There's no planning. There's no deep consideration. Nothing like that. So when you find yourself experiencing one of those moments and you've been triggered, and you know that, there's no imminent danger right here, right now, even though we rationally understand it, we may not emotionally get it. And so what I would encourage you is just continuously remind yourself, okay, it's not right now. This isn't happening right now. So the enemy, the demon, the monster, the boogeyman, the vile, angry crowd, they're not in front of me right now. They're not here with me right now. They're not threatening me right now in this moment. I may have to, there may be things for me to consider. This story, this experience that I'm seeing, reading about, hearing about, it may have something to share with me. It may inform my future, but I am not in imminent danger right now. So therefore, I've got to think. Because this moment isn't about protecting me from a catastrophic injury. This moment is about strategizing the future. It's about planning. It's about deep thought. It's about making change. It's about standing up and being an ally, being a partner. It's about informing the people around you to gather around you. It's interesting, how we will respond to some stressors, how we'll respond to stories that we hear, events that we hear about, experiences that we hear about. They're not ours, but yet they can bring us to that place where it feels like it's happening to us right now. We can get lost in that. And we can be hurt, harmed, injured by our stress response to that input. As healers, As healers, and all of us have this in us, but as healers, it's really super important that if that danger isn't imminent, we don't allow ourselves to get caught up in the fight, flight, or freeze narrative. We stop, we look around, we acknowledge where we are. We acknowledge the reality of the moment we are physically in. We breathe a little bit. Because these moments, again, they don't need me panicked. They don't need me running. They don't need me fighting. They don't need me freezing. They need me thinking. The world needs us calm and thoughtful and responsive as opposed to being reactionary. There are many different people here. There's many different people who join us on this channel. And all of us are going to be triggered by all kinds of different things. As a 50-year-old man, I did not expect to be triggered by Russia invading a country on the other side of the planet. And I was. It grabbed me. It gripped me. Despite the fact that I was sitting in a chair in my living room, there was part of me that was feeling like I absolutely had to be watching what was happening to know if I needed to protect myself from the Russians, the great red menace. And I know that in that place of being triggered, until I came to the realization, until I came to that rationale, it was stealing from being triggered was stealing from me, and I wasn't able to be the person that I think God asks me to be. Anyhow, amen.